welcome to an episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo. So the film that I'll be covering today is The Mask of Zorro. So The Mask of Zorro is a 1998 swashbuckler film that's based on the character Zorro created by Johnston McCulley. So the film is directed by Martin Campbell, who's known for directing films such as GoldenEye and Casino Royale. The screenplay is by John Esco, who's known for Air America, Ted Elliott, and Terry Russo, who's known for films such as Shrek and Aladdin. So the film stars Antonio Banderas, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Anthony Hopkins. Here is the synopsis. After being in prison for 20 years, Zorro, Don Diego de la Vega, played by Anthony Hopkins, receives word that his old enemy, Don Rafael Montero, played by Stuart Wilson, has returned. Don Diego escapes and returns to his old headquarters, where he trains aimless drunk Alejandro Murrieta, played by Antonio Banderas, to be his successor. Meanwhile, Montero, who has secretly raised Diego's daughter Elena, played by Catherine Zeta-Jones, as his own, hatches a plot to rob California of its gold. So the film was released in theaters on July 17, 1998. It had a production budget of $65 million. In regards to box office, it made over $233.7 million worldwide. It opened number one in North America with $22.5 million. It beated films including Lethal Weapon 4, Armageddon, and There's Something About Mary. In regards to critical reception, it has a 3.3 rating on Letterboxd. It was nominated for 2 Oscars for sound and sound effects editing. At the time of this recording, it is available on demand, so check your local provider. All right, let's get into first discovery. So I was fairly young when this movie came out. At the time, I was probably 7. And I do remember watching this movie in theaters with the family. I don't remember my initial thoughts, but I remember like throughout the years, I always found the film to be very engaging, was very entertaining as like a blockbuster film. And I think a few years ago, I bought the movie on 4K at Best Buy. And yeah, it's a very rewatchable movie with The Mask of Zorro. So I thoroughly enjoy that movie. Even though it has its issues here and there, it's an entertaining movie. And rewatching it now for the podcast, for me, it still holds up. And it makes me now like just appreciate its use of practical effects, at least as far as I could tell. And I really appreciate that when it came to the fight scenes, they used the actual like weapons with the swords as opposed to using CGI and all that stuff. So it kind of made like miss that. Like there's still use of practical effects, don't get me wrong, but there seems to be more emphasis on VFX or CGI and all that stuff. So watching this movie just made me miss things being done practically. All right, let's get into the highlights. So I really appreciate this movie that was Zorro. Of course, he's a hero. Some would say he's a superhero if you look at it through the current lens, given all the like the Marvel, DC movies and all that stuff. But he's more than a hero. He's really a symbol like for the people, because we've seen throughout the movie the people are oppressed and it's run by the corrupt people, which includes Don Rafael. So I love how with Zorro, like he gives people like hope that there is a hope for a better future, for a better outcome, even though Zorro is just one person doing it on his own. It gives the unfortunate something to look forward to. And I like how this movie, it's not super serious, given that it is a revenge movie. Um, but it's very self-aware with the humor. If you essentially see any of the fight scenes, for example, with Zorro, like he loves to have fun, I guess, as he's battling his enemies. So I thought that was cute. And I enjoyed the cast. The cast is solid for this movie. So Antonio Banderas, I mean, he's charming as always, as Alejandro. In a way, like, I don't know. I kind of had his role in Desperado in mind while watching this movie. Yeah, this movie came out a few years after Desperado. So, yeah, like I thought he was well cast in this movie as the co-lead. And yeah, he had fun obviously when he played Zorro, but also too um when, he was playing drunk and all that stuff. So, yeah, clearly he had fun with this role. And Anthony Hopkins, of course, he's great as like the mentor figure. And yeah, he you could say his character takes things more seriously than with Antonio Banderas, even though they both have revenge on their mind. With Alejandro, of course, the death of his brother Joaquin, while with Anthony Hopkins' character, of course, Elena being taken away and his wife Esperanza being killed. So yeah, I thought those two, they worked well together with their relationship throughout the movie. And yeah, Catherine Zeta-Jones, she was charming as Elena, because with her character is interesting, like, because her character is filled with a lot of curiosity, and it's easy, like, for her character, um, essentially being the daughter of Raphael, it's easy to dismiss her as like a socialite or as a spoiled rich kid. But I like how, like, with the character, how it's portrayed, she really is more than that. And and I love, yeah, how she's able to hold her own throughout this movie. My favorite moment of hers is when she was fighting Zorro in the barn. So that was a funny scene. But yeah, her, and also to her character with Alejandro, they had amazing chemistry throughout this movie. It was obvious that as soon as they met, there were sparks between us, despite their positions in the movie, essentially. And what else do I appreciate? There's a lot to appreciate with this movie. I thought the action scenes were nicely done. Yeah, there's some sprinkles of humor here and there. It's not super, super serious. And yeah, it was nicely choreographed as well. So yeah, like it was fun to appreciate those moments. And also too, I don't know if this was intentional. So the film opens and closes with a shot of Zorro. I'm assuming it's a body double that essentially does the Z sign with his sword. Now I wonder if that choice was to mirror the gun barrel sequence from the James Bond movies. I wonder that because the director Martin Campbell, as I mentioned in the beginning, he directed GoldenEye and Casino Royale. So I wonder if that was a nod to that, or if it was just a cool way to open and end the movie. But maybe, maybe. Because I never thought of that before, but just rewatching it now, I'm like, oh, was it a nod to that? Maybe, maybe. And I thought, yeah, the I loved the production design. The costumes were neatly done. Like as a period piece, I thought, yeah, they're pretty solid on those fronts. The score by James Horner I found was very epic and romantic. It really matched the tones throughout the movie. Also to the song, I Want to Spend My Lifetime Loving You is a very romantic song. It serves as I would say, the love theme for not just Alejandro and Elena, but Don Diego and Esperanza. So, and also to love like throughout the movie when it comes to those moments, like the song is played as a motif for that. And yeah, like as for the song itself, I thought Mark Anthony and Tina Arena did an amazing job with that song. Their voices matched for that. So yeah, that's all what I have for highlights. So let's get into the lowlights. So I believe this movie was rated PG-13. So I don't have an issue when it comes to that rating, but I found that with that rating, it kind of makes the death scenes look hilarious for the most part. Because clearly, like, you see a character dies on screen, but it does not show the gore with that. So an example with Esperanza, as she, is heading towards Elena, she gets shot by one of the soldiers. Like clearly she got shot, but it doesn't show that she got shot because how they structure it is that she gets shot from behind, she falls and then immediately dies. I thought in a way it was a bit comical. Also, to another example was later in the movie when the three finger guy, I forgot his name, when he races towards Captain Love with that weapon. Captain Love like shoots him and he goes like flying off. I thought that was funny. That was funny. So. I imagine like when it came to those moments, it was probably intentional to maintain that rating, but I just found it was quite hilarious. It kind of reminded me of what you would watch like during like Saturday morning cartoons when it comes to those moments. So I thought that was funny. Also too, I wasn't quite sure with this, but so after when Elena was taken away from Don Diego as a baby and then Esperanza's death, Diego was arrested. But then it showed 20 years later he's still looking for him. I did not get that because I figured he already knew where Diego was, so it didn't make sense to search for him in jail, but I don't know. I don't know. Also too, with Don Raphael's plan to make a California independent, I wasn't didn't seem like a bad idea unless if there was some sort of deal between Mexico and California, but I wasn't too sure on that front in regards to uh, Raphael's motives because it seemed clear that he wanted to steal um, money from the opposite side and all that stuff, but I wasn't too clear on that front. Also too, so Joaquin, with Alejandro's brother. So as they are being chased, so Joaquin he essentially sacrifices himself, and and as Captain Love is about to kill him, essentially, Joaquin decides to pull out the gun and shoots himself. But then Captain Love he severs Joaquin's head, and then later, and then we see his hand when Alejandro sees the body parts inside jars, which is weird. So, but essentially, the film they treat it as if that Captain Love killed Joaquin, which is not true. Because Joaquin killed himself so he doesn't get captured or doesn't want to die in the hands of Captain Love. But Alejandro sees it that that Captain Love killed him, which is why he wants revenge. So I thought that was hilarious because technically Joaquin killed himself, but I guess we just have to go along with it because that's what the movie says and all that stuff. And also too, as a final note for Lowlight, Captain Love, I thought it was a funny name for a villain. Because clearly his actions throughout the movie are opposite of that. Maybe it was intentional with the name or with the original source material. That's probably how it was. I don't know, but I just thought it was hilarious on that. So let's get into trivia, some fun facts. There's a lot of fun facts for this movie, so I'll try to narrow those down. So Robert Rodriguez was originally attached to direct, but the studio did not agree with his much more violent and R-rated proposal. Because I do wonder though, like, if it was like R-rated, it would have been obviously more gory, more violent. Because as I mentioned, like with the death scenes, are quite hilarious how it's structured in the movie. But yeah, it would definitely be a different take had Robert Rodriguez been involved with this movie. So Steven Spielberg, so he is one of the executive producers for this movie. So apparently he, I guess, was offered to direct at some point, but he declined because he was busy with Saving Private Ryan, which I believe came out in 1998. Also, too, Martin Campbell, as I mentioned, directed GoldenEye. Apparently, he turned down the chance to direct the sequel, Tomorrow Never Dies, to direct this movie. And likewise, Anthony Hopkins was considered for the role of the main villain in that film. But then Campbell eventually returned to the Bond franchise with Casino Royale, while Anthony Hopkins appeared in another spy-themed franchise sequel, which is Mission Impossible 2. So I found that was interesting, but it seemed clear that Martin Campbell, like with the success of GoldenEye, he probably wanted to do something different, which is why he chose this movie than Tomorrow Never Dies. So I thought that was interesting. Also too, so according to an account in the book Tales from the Script by Peter Hansen and Paul Robert Herman, David S. Ward rewrote approximately 85% of the dialogue, but received no on-screen credit, a predicament that spawned enough controversy to merit a front-page article in the Los Angeles Times. Interesting. Also, too, legend has it that Martin Campbell didn't want to use Zorro's famous bullwhip in this film. However, Anthony Hopkins felt the whip was an important part to Zorro's equipment. Hopkins practiced with it daily and learned to manipulate it well enough to film certain tricks, such as the candle scene, but only after heavily applied persuasion towards Campbell. The whip was custom made by Alex Green. He gave it to Hopkins after he doubled for the actor in Legends of the Fall and The Edge. Oh, I found that was interesting because, yeah, I thought Anthony Hopkins did a good job with the whip and all that stuff. So that's interesting fun fact there. So also too, Catherine Zeta-Jones admitted that she became genuinely aroused during the stable sword fight scene where her clothes were cut off by Zorro. This effect was accomplished by attaching a wire to the dress and then yanking it off of her. Also, too, despite being one of the main antagonists of the film that has a personal rivalry with Alejandro, Matt Letcher, who plays Captain Love, admitted that it was hard to act with hatred against Antonio Banderas since he was such a generally nice guy in real life. Interesting. At the end, when Zorro confronts Captain Love, he pulls out a sword and the sun glints off the blade running the full length. This was not CGI and was suggested by Antonio Banderas. He had to tilt the sword to catch the sun without breaking eye contact with Matt Letcher. It only took 3 takes. Also, too, this movie was initially set for release on December 19th, 1997, before it was changed to March 1998. There was speculation within the media about whether TriStar changed the date in an attempt to avoid competition with Titanic. In reality, the movie had encountered production problems that extended its shooting schedule. In addition, Sony Pictures Entertainment, TriStar's parent company, wanted an action movie for its first quarter releases of 1998. And then lastly, the sequel, The Legend of Zorro, was released in 2005, which didn't do well in comparison to the first one. Now, I do remember the sequel. I don't know if I watched it for sure. It's probably one of those things where I'll have to watch it to know if I could recall it and all that stuff. So yeah, like I'll probably check out the sequel at some point. So there's that. All right. So the final question, should this movie be rediscovered? And I say absolutely yes. Because it has like the characteristics of a superhero film, even though it's not like the traditional superhero film as you would know today from like Marvel, DC, and all that stuff. And yeah, just everything about it's fantastic, from like the costumes, production design, the action scenes, the cast, the music, all that stuff. It's fantastic, and also too just makes you appreciate old school filmmaking. So there's that. All right. So that pretty much concludes this episode of the podcast. So you can find me on Instagram, X, YouTube, and Linktree at Nomfanelo. You can find the podcast on Instagram, X, YouTube, and Linktree at RD Movies Pod. You could visit buymeacoffee.com/RD Movies Pod to donate to support the podcast. On Spotify app, you can answer the feature poll, leave a comment, and rate the podcast. On Apple Podcasts, you could leave a review and rate the podcast. And you can submit questions, comments, or suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, to be featured on the after show, which will air after the season finale. So, all right, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to catch you on the next one.